Hello, my name is Armin Krauss. I work for Avantgarde Acoustic for 22 years now, and I'm mainly working in the customer support office. I give technical support to our distributors and to our distribution guys, our sales force. And I also take care of guests here in the showroom. And what you see behind me is our production and showroom building here 60 kilometers south of Frankfurt. The place is called Reichenbach, in a region called the Odenwald, the forest of the Odes, here in the middle of Germany. This is a building of around about 1,500 square meter production area, and it also incorporates a showroom area of some roughly 400 square meters, where we have a showroom where all our products are on display visually, and a studio where all our speakers are on demonstration and can also be listened one after the other. So we can give a full overview over our portfolio. And just to the right of me, or to the left of me, there is another building, because Avantgarde Acoustic is split. So we have the production building behind me, and we have the office building to that side. And in the office building, we have our offices for the CEOs, for the logistics people, for the back office. So now we're here in the assembly hall, where the speakers are created, are really manufactured, and especially at the production line of the Uno and Duo speakers. And just to give you a little example of how we work here, the speakers are here set up in small batches. So we are a manufacturer, we do everything by hand, but it's not like we would produce one speaker after the other, just like the orders come in. We try to keep a routine with building the speakers, because this giving our guys this kind of a routine feeling gives them confidence in what they are doing and gives them the confidence that they do the right thing. Don't have to think twice about every step. So you can see here, for example, that we have now 6 speakers on that production run. And what we do here is, I took here out of this board, I took here a tweeter assembly of a pair of Unos. And the speakers are set up like this, facing upwards with the openings. So we can put in all the driver units. This is the mid-range driver, the tweeter driver, and later on we put in the bass. And after that, the speakers are turned around, so we can assemble and mount the amplifier units. Here on the bottom, you can see that already the feet are assembled. And after this is done, you can follow me over to that station. We have a little pneumatic machine, because when the speakers are assembled, they get really heavy. So a minimum weight of some 70 to 80 kilos. So it would be very heavy to carry them. And for that we have this little pneumatic machine where we can take the speakers here onto this kind of platform and then let them down by air force. Okay, so here we are at the station where we process the horns. Exactly speaking, the surface of the horns, because it is very important for us that we have a perfect lacquering surface on them. So you can see here we have those different sizes, we have many different colors, and on this station we have a lot of light. We have windows to the right of me, we have windows in front of me, we have a lot of lamps here on the ceiling, so that we can really make sure we can see everything and really control the quality here. If we would find, because they are coming from an outside lacquer shop, if we would find here something where we could say this could still be improved, then we have a station over here where we can re-polish the horns. So this helps us to maintain this extreme high quality level of the surfaces. And if we move on from here, you can see here on the shelves also the smaller horns, and later on we will also show you the storage for the bigger ones. And if I go around the table, we can also already show you the driver storage. So on these shelves, we store all the drivers that already passed our quality control. This can best be shown here. I take these tweeters away because they travel here with their twin passports, so to speak. So we made sure that these drivers are really the same, have exactly the same specs, and from then on, they will always stay together. So we make sure that the drivers that are matched like this then really come to the same pair of speakers. And for example, just to show you the varieties, this is the low-mid driver of the trio. As you can see, very special basket, our own design and our own make. We use an Alnico-like magnet here, so we make sure that the magnetic forces and, even more important, the linearity of the magnetic field is the best that can be achieved. And we also have here, this is good to show on this driver because the dome is relatively big. We have this proprietary membrane diaphragm material, which we call the soft mesh. So this is a membrane material that has a mesh, which is actually, I have to put it away for that to show you, which is actually woven like a cloth. And if I show this to you by my hand, you can see there are slots in between. So it's not acoustically sealed. How would this work as a membrane? What we do is, or the idea behind it, this mesh is extremely lightweight and stiff still. And this is what we want, because we want a membrane that is really reactive, fast. But of course, as it's acoustically transparent, it doesn't make sound. So what we do is, in the rear of this membrane, we put a resin. It's our special recipe. And this is really rubbed into these slots from the rear side. And this resin will never dry out. It's like a rubber that is for a lifetime not drying out. And this means we combine two properties. One is lightweight and stiff, and one is soft. So this lightweight and stiff membrane will really move piston-like, while this damping material, this rubber material that we apply in the back, eliminates even the last little resonance of that membrane material. It adds mass, okay, yeah, because this is some, I guess with this driver it's some 4.5 grams of mass that we add. But we don't care, because our drivers behind the horns, they only have to move for a fraction of a millimeter. They don't move like you may know this from other speakers by a centimeter back and forth, where you of course have to make sure that you move as little mass as possible. But as we move only by the fraction of a millimeter, the extra mass doesn't play a role, because this membrane structure and the magnet structure is anyway strong enough to make that kind of a small movement as immediate as probably no other driver can be. And yeah, another interesting thing here is our, actually I would call it our nugget, our golden nugget driver, because this is really unique on the market. This is the mid-range driver of the trio. You can see here the same material, the same mesh structure, just smaller. And we have encapsulated this all, sealed it, so to speak, from external influence, so to speak, to make sure that this driver, because the trio mid-range driver, of course, mid-range, it's the core of the sound, that this driver is unaffected from everything from the outside world. Just produces sound waves that go into the horns, period. And this makes it a really unique piece. So you can also see there's only little stock here, because they're also produced in very small amounts. Yeah, okay. And now we are entering the room where probably most of the pictures are taken when we have visitors here. Please follow me. Because this is the storage for the horns, where we try to be as well stocked as possible. So we are, of course, always watching the market, trying to filter out from our orders what are the colors that are most popular at the moment. So here we have the opportunity to stock those colors. You can see the orange because it became popular in the past few months, so we made sure we always have a set of orange horns for every kind, uno, duo, or trio speaker here, so that we can process orders quickly. We have this bluish color, because this is a color that we show a lot of times in our brochures. So we assume that people that see it and like it may ask for it. Then we have those matte colors on stock here, because we see that at the moment, if you go to the car industry, if you go to the furniture industry, that more and more of the luxury style products, of the lifestyle products, are no longer shiny. They are no longer polished to a shiny surface, but have this matte, elegant matte appearance rather. And so this stock reflects all of this. And as you can see, we still have ample space. So at the moment, we are still waiting for the inputs from the market so that we can fill them up again with the colors that are most needed. Good. This room is our measuring room, where we measure the complete speakers. So we do have measuring stations as well for the drivers alone, for the amplifiers alone, but of course you need one station where you make sure that the whole speaker, the fully assembled speaker, is performing to specs, and this is done here. So here we have positions marked on the floor, we have a very sensitive measuring microphone, and we have a setup here by computer where we can make sure that we record everything correctly. As you may see, this room is acoustically treated, but it is not acoustically dead. So it's not an anechoic chamber. Why? Because this is a room that is not designed for that kind of R&D work where you might need anechoic. This is a room where you have to have the opportunity to make a recording of every speaker model where you get a good reference curve. If this looks like ruler flat, or if this looks like a silhouette of the Alps, we don't care. The important thing is that all speakers that are measured here, all unos, all duos, all trios, measure the same as the reference. And I can show this here to you, where we still have the old school printouts. Today we do this all by computer, of course, where you can see that we took a reference curve, which seems a little bit bumpy, but this is not relevant because all the other speakers that we measure inside here have to look the same. And so we can still make sure they are all in very small limits, in very small tolerance corridors, so that we have perfect left to right matching. This is probably the most important. And of course, a very, very good matching from one uno to another uno, from one duo to another duo. Then we do this today, all recorded, and of course also the measuring signals produced by computer. And this gives us the opportunity to make a lot of measurings at one procedure. And with these measurings, we make sure that a customer that might have a problem because something happened on the transport, a membrane got damaged, or a faulty amplifier blew a voice coil, or yeah, the unavoidable story that the cleaning woman killed a mid-range driver while cleaning the horn. Yeah? So that this doesn't become a tragedy, because here we have enough data collected that we can make sure that from our driver stock we will find a new matching driver that we can send. And this means that you don't have to buy a complete new pair of drivers or a complete new driver units. You really just need to exchange this one driver that is faulty. And we can more or less guarantee this for some 10 to 15 years. After that, when stocks run low, okay, it can be a little bit more tedious, but still we have options for that too. But this is only possible if you have recorded all the data so well that you are able to do this for many, many years. So in here, we more or less make sure everything performs to technical specs. We made sure there is no polarity change. We made sure there is nothing loose, rattling, where you could see, okay, this curve is extremely bumpy, probably we have a contract problem, and so on. But the most important also for our customers is here, left and right of your head. So we can go out again, because here we then have a listening station. And it's a really big space, because a lot of the time we deal with bigger shipments. If we do international business, and this we do by 80 to 85%, we have to understand that it's not a speaker by speaker shipment, it's a shipment maybe with 3, 4 or 5 speakers at the same time. So we have to make sure we have the space here to recheck all 3, 4, 5 speakers at the same time. So they will all be set up here. We have a little hi-fi system to play them. We have connectors behind them, so we can connect them all directly and then switch between them. And it's so important, because some things really are very, very difficult to measure. You have to make sure you listened to the speaker before you package them, because the only measuring in this instrument that is not only measuring quantitative things, so how loud is which frequency at which time, but where you can really say something is wrong here. I can hear that this voice is not clear. I can hear that this detail is missing. You can only do by ear. So before they get packaged, and you see the carton standing here already, before they get packaged, they must be listened to, and this is done here. Okay. Another very important thing with our big speakers is, of course, logistics and packaging. So here we are in the packaging area, and yeah, maybe some of you wonder that this is not really a big area. But the challenge is to make compact packagings. It's so easy to put, every piece on a single pallet. But this gives you a lot of trouble then during shipping and keeping everything together. And of course, it's expensive if you have a lot of singular pieces. So what we try here is to be as effective as possible. And this also is reflected here in our procedures. So that in the end, for example, it's nice that it's standing here so we can show this, a pair of duos, which is a really big, impressive speaker, can be moved on just one pallet. This simplifies a lot of things and also reduces cost in the end. So we try to be as effective and as compact with this as possible. You can see that everything we need is here. We have pallets in different sizes. We have carton boxes folded flat here, which we then can open. You can see here the wooden crates in the rear, which we use then for the space horns. So everything is sitting here and waiting. This can be also relatively quickly and effective procedures. And once this is all packaged, the speakers move out to the stock area. And up there, where we then next take a walk down, is all stock for trio and space horns. So you can see even if we are very effective here with our packaging, we still produce a lot of shipping volumes. Okay. So here the boxes are all ready to go for trio, this ones, and space horns. And they need to be crated. There is no way to ship these on pallets. They have to be much safer packaged, and for this we need those crates. What you can also see here, very important thing, we have those tilt and shock watches. Because as they are so big and heavy, we have to take into account that not everybody who is working with them, you know, with a forklift, for example, is super careful with them. And so we have to make sure that if something goes wrong with the handling of them, this can be seen from the outside. This is not only realized when you open the box. So we use these shock watches, and actually we use two of them. So here one and here one, because we also indicate by these, we also indicate that the speakers were always transported laying down, laying flat, because this is very important. So sometimes they consume a lot of space, a lot of area. So if we would not do this tilt watching, some of the stockists, they would tilt them upwards. But this would be tragic for the inside, so the speakers would tumble. And to avoid this, we have applied this safety measures. And if we go further up, we still have the stocking place for all the other models. Like here, again, a pallet with Unos. Like down there, again, a pallet with Duos. And yeah, I was talking already about our international business. And this is clearly reflected here. This is going to Australia. Over here, this will go to the Netherlands. This is a shipment for Singapore. This is a shipment for France, for Norway, for Finland. Yeah. So yeah, we do business all around the world, and that's very important for us. Germany is our biggest single market on the world, but it is still important for us that we have international partners, because the market for horn speakers is not the biggest market in the speaker field, one thing, and secondly, it is really satisfying to see that this kind of technology, that this kind of design that we do is appreciated all around the world. And so I think it's very important and very interesting to see that here, that it's really going to anywhere in the world. Big speakers means big packaging, a lot of packaging. So now we're here in the big storage area, and our storage area is even bigger than our production area. Why? Because we have the packaging materials, the most important packaging materials, the ones that protect the speakers, made from some, what's that called? Not styrofoam, it's EPP foam. And this means we have tools for them, where you can foam them in, not only 1, 2, 3, or 10. No, you have to make this in hundreds, maybe with some pieces even in thousands. So this means, of course, that we have to provide the space to stock all those parts. And of course, there's still cartons here, flat packs, and there are, of course, also other parts that we need to make sure that we can really safely package the speaker. And to show you a little bit more in detail what this means, we have opened this pallet with the main packaging parts for Unos and Duos. Unos and Duos have different sizes. So still we can work with the same size EPP parts. How do we do this? it's like Lego. So this is not one part, this is two parts. And depending on how we fit these together, you can see the gap here, we can either put them as close together as possible, this is then for Unos, more compact, or we can fit them a little bit more widespread and then fixate them for the duo speakers. This helps a little bit in reducing especially the volumes for them, but it still doesn't save us from ordering many of them. So again, this is why we need such a huge storage area. When we design R&D our speakers, we also have to make prototypes, or at least something that works, where we can comprehend if our ideas really work and can come to life. And for that, we have a workshop here. And it's mainly a metal and wood workshop, where we have this big, I think it's a 4-axis milling machine. We can cut and saw things with that machine. We have a sandblasting box. We have a big drill. We have here this, what's it called, with the sandpaper. We can polish surfaces or smooth out surfaces. Yeah, sometimes you have to be quick and dirty just to make sure if it's worth pursuing the idea or not. And this is the perfect room for it. It's an engineer's toy box here to make sure that the brainchild is really coming to life. What we can show you here is how we package the speakers. My colleague Benny was just about to do this, and I can help him a little bit. So you can see we package the speakers standing upright. There is a pallet and a box on it, and we have those special red cards that Benny is just pushing inside the carton. And finally, he only has to pull out that, and we're done. And in many other cases, you would have to tilt everything into a different direction to make sure it's possible at all to put the speakers inside. But we can do this with the speaker standing exactly as it's supposed to be for the shipping in the end. Yeah, modern times require modern production methods, and we lately acquired a 3D laser printer. It's a sintering printer. So it melts polyamide, which is nylon dust, to structures like this. Just to give you the example, this is a cap that we produce for our capacitors. So one sits on the one end and the other on the other end. The capacitor in between, here we have holes. And these holes correspond with holes in the circuit boards of the crossovers. So our capacitors are not simply glued onto the board or just strapped down with a tie-down strap. No, they are screwed onto the board, which is even better. Or we produce something like these, like cable feeds. So inside our speakers, we have cable ducts. And to make sure that the cable stays isolated at all time, is not scrubbed somewhere on a metal part or so, we make our own cable feeds to make sure that the cable is smoothly running inside the speaker. And another important thing with 3D printing, just as I told you, this is using nylon dust, nylon powder. After the printing process, there is still a lot of powder on these things. So even bigger than the printer, here is the cleaning machine for that. So when the parts come out of the printer, they are really covered in dust. So you really have to dig them out, so to speak. And after that, you still have to make sure that all the residual dust is taken away. And for this machine then has this suction unit and uses a lot of brushes, which you then use or need to apply by hand, of course, so that you can make sure that you can really clean them afterwards and that they don't get sticky after they have been produced. Here at Avantgarde Acoustic, we not only assemble our speakers on our own. We also assemble our electronics on our own. So in this room, which is upstairs from the assembly hall for the speakers, we have an electronics production room. And yeah, you can see here my colleague Jürgen working on a passive crossover.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see we have all the parts, we have all the screws, we have the metal plates, we have the circuit boards, and this is all assembled here, which means yeah, an extreme depth in the manufacturing process, and with this, an extreme control over the end result. And over here you can see how this looks when Jürgen is ready. You see the fully assembled board, you see the caps with those caps that hold it down on the circuit board. You can see the WBT connector terminals assembled to it. It's a massive piece of cast aluminium. You can see the circuit parts that we use to charge the capacitor. I mean, that's an interesting thing in itself, that we not use only one capacitor, we use two capacitors in series. Because between the two capacitors, we apply a bias voltage. And this bias voltage is created from the musical signal. Here you can see a little transformer. And this transformer, just for a few seconds, taps voltage, spikes from the signal, puts them into a cascade. Here you can see the soldering spots. It's mounted from the rear of the pallet, of the board, so you don't see the parts, the electronic parts. So the signal charges the capacitors up to 100 volts, and then this circuit closes so that we have no more backlash on the signal or whatever, but the capacitors stay biased, which means that incremental signal changes, like with very high frequencies, are cleaner than with a capacitor that would always cross the zero line during the music signal going from positive to negative. But that's a specialty on its own, and of course we have white papers on this. But this is how it's applied, how it works. Then we also have a station for soldering, because we are also doing our own cable harnesses here. So here you see the prefab and ready to go into the speakers. Over here you see the soldering station. So we can produce all these internal connectors and cabling also on our own. In this station, you can see it's full of screws and little discs and plastic spacers, lots and lots of things. So it needs a bit of training to make sure that everybody is aware of what it takes to build such an electronic module. But we're very lucky, we're very fortunate and very happy that we have people here working for us that know the products now for many, many years. And also the new guys that come in have a very good training here by people that really do this now for many years. Yeah, and Frank, for example, is working with iTRON modules. So this is our new core technology for the active speakers. And well, latest with this, it is absolutely logic and necessary that we do this in-house, because this technology is so new and so unique that we are probably the only ones that really understand how it works. And that's why we also do this here on our own. I mean, what's special about the amplifiers, for example, you can see this here, this is the circuit boards for a tweeter and for a mid-range amplifier, is that we are using here those current compensated chokes in the speaker output. And thinking about this in electronic terms alone is very, very special. And again, one of the main reasons why we do this here, or prefer to do this here. We also have 2 rooms for our R&D and production of electronic parts like boards. And we can start here in the mad professor's playroom. At the moment it looks relatively clean because Matthias doesn't have to do actual R&D work at the moment. But you can see here a lot of screens and computers. So here we do the layouts for the boards, for example. We have this big storage carousel for all those little parts like capacitors, like integrated circuits, SMD parts, and so on, so that Matthias can work here really from brain to hand directly and make prototypes here. And if everything that is conceived here has come to a stage where Matthias can say, okay, first it works, secondly it makes a difference, I can hear it already, and thirdly it is producible, it's not something so special that only a few guys in the world could work with it. No, it's producible, it could be a real product, a good chance for a real product. Then we go to the next room where we then have a real electronic workshop. And in this workshop we not only do what I just described, that we bring the ideas really to life on real boards in a real circuitry, but we also use this room for pre-production for our electronic assembly. Just as an example, and because they are sitting here, it's good to use them to show that. This is a board that is then also used in the iTRON electronics. So it's either a tweeter or a mid-range amplifier for one of our active modules. And on this board you can see a lot of very small parts, these SMDs, you can see relays, you can see capacitors, and you can see the transistors. And part of this comes to us already assembled. So the SMD parts are already assembled. This integrated circuit is assembled. The transistors are already soldered to it. But other parts we still need to select and sometimes match. For example, these capacitors. So the boards come to us only half assembled. And only after we did the checks for all those critical parts where we have smaller tolerance than what you would usually get, and so we have to select them ourselves, is then soldered onto this board as an additional process, and this is also all done here in this workshop. Another purpose is, of course, this selecting process. So you can see here a lot of testing and measuring equipment like oscilloscopes in various sizes. We have test benches here where we have a relatively easy way to connect everything we need in short time to make sure we can hook up the parts or fully assembled boards and give them a final check. And of course we also do repairs. So our products are meant to have a very long lifespan in home use. So we try to keep as much as possible also here on stock, even assembled as boards still, or then as parts that we can use as replacements for speakers that have been sold some 10, 15, 20 years ago. And for that we still have an original setup here with subwoofers, for example, and we keep reference amplifiers of the older subwoofer modules also here, so that when, for whatever reason, we get a subwoofer module back for repair or for checking, that we can still make sure that we can firstly fully understand what's going on, and secondly always make sure we can send it back fully repaired and performing to the original specs. one more thing that is nice to see here, and I always envy the guys that work here that they have this luxury in their office. They can use a pair of trios to monitor and to check whatever they assembled here, if it not only works to specs, but also sounds correctly. And therefore, we have assembled here a complete trio system to give them that opportunity. When we talk of horns, about horns, everybody thinks today of the lacquered ones, the finished ones. Yeah? But here we show you the raw horns. This is how they come from the pressure molding process, because this is what we do with them. 30 years ago, Holger, our founder, made a huge investment. And I mean it. It was a huge investment, a high six-figure investment, to make sure that we have pressure molding tools available for these horns. Usually you would use pressure molding only if you think thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. We are talking several hundreds maximum, which is actually crazy because the time alone to use these tools, put them into a machine, adjust them to a 6 millimeter distance, because this is what we have here, a 6 millimeter strong or thick horn, is days of work to do that. And but the idea, the main thing, the objective why we did this is the quality, because only pressure molding gives you that precision of hundreds of a millimeter or less, and it makes sure that the horns that were produced 30 years ago and the horns that are produced today are like twins. They're exactly the same. And this kind of sustainability in the production is the only way also to get a return on investment. You cannot think quick, dirty, fast. You have to think sustainable. You have to think long term to make this a good business also for you. But again, in the end, it's about quality, and the quality that we get out of the molding, pressure molding process is not replaceable by anything else. Just to give you a quick overview, the tools for this trio horn are 8 tons. So imagine adjusting a positive and a negative form that weigh together some 8 tons is really a task. It can be really tedious. When the horns come, they arrive like this, white. We use an ABS material for this. ABS is known also from the automobile industry for the dashboards, for example, because ABS is really a very good, a high-class plastic material, because it has adjustable properties. ABS, 3 components, have a recipe that you can influence. And we chose a recipe that made those horns for audio signals inert, so we don't get extra noise from the horns, so to speak. They have an internal structure that is a little bit foamy, and this gives an internal damping of the material that rids us of any resonances that would occur in such a material. When they come, they have rough edges, because in the pressure molding process you will not get a smooth edge here. For this we have built our own smoothing machine. So onto this axis we put the horns, and then we use a knife, a blade. You can still see the residue from the ABS. And then this machine has a motor, so the horn is turned, and by holding this blade to the edge in different angles, you will then be able to smooth out the edge. Relatively simple, but you have to have the idea. So again, talking about the horns, they are made for us here in Europe. Of course, if you think pressure molding, you think volume usually. I talked about this already. But we are not thinking volume, we are thinking quality. And with quality also comes communication. So why did we not go to faraway countries where this could also be done for us. Why did we stay in Europe with that? Because we need this connection to our suppliers. We are a 20-people company. And it is always good for us to have people at our hand if we would realize something is warped here. We have shading inside here because the material here, because this is ABS in recycled form. ABS is recycling material, a perfect recycling material, can be used many times, but still we have to make sure that we don't have color shades inside here because they can shine through the lacquering depending on what you use as a color, as a finishing color in the end. So whatever happens, we need this connection. We need to pick up the phone and call them or directly schedule a flight to them, whatever, just to make sure we get the control we need. And in the end, we get a few hundreds of those horns. This is a normal production batch. At the moment, it's relatively empty because we gave a lot of those horns into the lacquering process. So I would say during the next 2-3 months, this will fill up here rapidly again. And so you can see here the various sizes. You can see here that we have really ample space to stock them, so that our production process always has the raw material available that then can go into the lacquering process and finally into the speaker building process. Now we're entering the Avantgarde Acoustic showroom. You can follow me up the steps. You can, for example, see that the door handles are the Avantgarde logo. So another very warm welcome. And here we have the exhibition of our speaker systems. To the right, you can see the smaller models like the Duo, Duo GT, Duo SD, Uno SD, and the Zero TA. And on the opposite side, we have the Trio standing. We are still in a phase where we refurbish this room. Now that we have the new products, we prefer to build and use the speaker systems for our customers, but we will also have a bit more stuff in this showroom also very soon. So this is our first handshake for our customers, you can say. It also features a detail exhibition of our new drivers, like here a mid-range driver of the Trio, like one of the new bass drivers, like detail parts of the mid-range and tweeter, assemblies of the Duos and Unos, crossover parts, footing parts, and so on, so that we can have a first view of what is the heart, the core, technically, of our products. And of course, the Trio stands free, like this, because this is the speaker where there is most to explain what has changed from the XD version to the G3 version. And the next thing over here is the visitors lounge. So here people can have a rest, can arrive, can have a coffee, can have a drink, of course, a good place to speak as well, to talk. We have in the background a sample color wall, which features our standard colors, of course, but also a few colors that from various sources, like color advisors, like the furniture industry. Sometimes we get ideas from the automobile industry. So actually we have 12 standard colors, or 12 colors that we can standardly supply, while this wall features 24 colors, where we keep changing these extra colors to make people aware of what's possible, to give ideas, so to speak. And we also here have a counter where people can also sit and have a sip of coffee or a sip of tea. We have a very nice Italian-style coffee machine as well. So if someone needs a refreshment on that for the brain, for the body, we can also supply a very good espresso. Yeah, and then we come to the tunnel, as we call it. This is the section that connects the showroom with the studio. We also call it our Walk of Fame, because in here you see it on the wall. We have a lot of the prizes and awards that Avantgarde Acoustic has won over the past 30 years on display here. This includes a Golden IF Award. This includes an ASA Award. This includes innovation awards by the CES, a Grand Prix award or two even from Japan. So yeah, this is something that we are also really very proud of. And finally, we can enter the temple, the actual listening room, the studio. And this room has been conceived following the rules of the golden section. So the width and the length are in a ratio of round about 1 by 1.6, so that we have much less problems with standing waves. And more important, we have several positions here in the room, several walls here in the room that are good for presentations, because this room should give us the opportunity to demonstrate all the speakers from Uno to Trio, but we cannot put them all to the same wall. So we have to divide, we have to put a demonstration here. We still have a free wall here because there's more products to come, and we have the Trio wall here, but still we wanted to make sure that all the products are demonstratable in a good way in all three demonstration positions. And this meant that we had to make sure that the room doesn't have only good properties in certain areas or certain corners. This is why golden section. And what we can achieve here is that we have the speakers, as you can see, in an ABC arrangement, so that they all have the same distance from one channel to the other. And we have a listening chair here in the center point. So they are standing on a circle, and this listening chair is on the center point of that circle. So a customer that sits here can listen to all the speakers in one go, and we only have to reconnect from one speaker to another speaker. Takes only little time to do this, while the customer can still sit here and only has to turn his head for one more increment to listen from Uno to Duo SD to Duo GT. This helps us to make sure that people understand why an Uno exists, why other way around. Why an Uno is not the only speaker that exists, although many people already like that sound already very much, but also why we still produce a Duo SD, why we still produce a Duo GT, and of course, in the end, why we still have to build the Trio system. This is the new family of GT3 speakers of Avantgarde Acoustic, starting with the Uno SD. SD stands for single drive, by the way. Then the Duo SD, clearly discernible by the bigger horns, bigger tweeter horn and bigger mid-range horn. And finally, the Duo GT, which means grand twin, which indicates that we have a twin bass drive here. The basses are all bass reflex loaded, and the reflex output, the venting output, is to the floor. So we have the opening on the bottom of the speaker. The Duo GT looks from the front, I would say, more or less like the previous model. So the changes are not too obvious. Maybe one more obvious change is that the tweeter is now here inside, completely inside the bass cabinet, while it was protruding with the earlier models. But I will explain later on why we could do this, put the tweeter really completely inside by designing a new horn. And in previous models, we had a frame that was using frame rails to support this mid-range unit. And in the new speakers, in the new Duo GT, we are using a frame panel on both sides. And this frame panel, you can see it is here tilted, inclined, so that it nicely goes from this relatively wide to this relatively narrow tube in a smooth transition. This panel also incorporates the internal wiring. So all the cables that are in the rear are just the cables that you as a customer would connect to it. Everything else that is needed as an internal cabling is then hidden, and in this case by or inside this frame panel. Another change from the XD series to the G3 is here on the rear. It used to be a complete frame piece, bottom frame we called it, that incorporated all 4 spikes, and in this new series we have individual feet. These are outriggers, and these outriggers also feature a dented ring at their inner fixation. So if the position of these would be odd in your situation, in your room, you could also tilt them in a different direction and put them completely and straight to the front if you liked, or in an angle, or you could swing them completely against the cabinet. So in every situation where the speaker has to go very close to boundaries, walls or furniture or whatever, the feet still give you a bit of flexibility with their placement, and still you don't have to take them off or replace them by something else. So you have the original stability of our feet. Then here we have a turning mechanism. Maybe you can see it, that the speaker is now coming up if I turn this. So by hand force, this is easily adjustable. Here we use and recommend for the setup gliding feet. So these are not tipped, but make it much easier if you adjust the speaker in a first step in your room to find out where they might sound best. And if you found a position where you say, now I have very good imaging, now I have determined the wall distance so that my bass is dry and deep and everything, then we would still recommend to tilt the speaker to the side, to either side, with the help of a second person, of course, and then replace those gliding feet by the original spikes, which we also supply. The biggest change is otherwise made in the rear, where we have, on the example here of the Uno, a completely new structure. And while the camera is following me, you can also see that the cabinets are now all high gloss finish, which was required or coming from feedback that we got from many markets, that people prefer to have speakers like ours in a shiny surface. And what we see here in the rear is the modular concept of this new series, because all G3 models are available as passive models. So here you see the unit that incorporates the passive crossover. They can be ordered as active models. This is the amplifier module incorporating our iTRON active module, this special current drive technology that is exclusive to us. And here on the bottom, we have the subwoofer unit with its DSP and the adjustment buttons for the DSP. This is always present because our speakers are always partly active, semi-active. While these two modules, the iTRON and the passive crossover, are arbitrary, so to speak. So for a customer that orders the passive version, this middle section with the iTRON would just be a blank cover. Same appearance, but without any connectors, without any switches. And for a customer that would buy the speaker as an iTRON version, as an active version, here the passive crossover would be replaced by a blank box. Again, without any connectors, without any switching option. This is a special version that we supply to dealers where we have both installed and both activated. By this BNC cable, we can supply a coding signal, 12 volt, that tells the built-in crossover to either switch the signal of the iTRON towards the drivers or the signal from your external amplifier. So by the flick of a switch, this cable is prolonged until the seating, the listening seat. By the flick of a switch, you can this way switch between the two options and hear the difference immediately. So you can switch back and forth between the passive, means regular voltage amplifier operation, and the active means iTRON operation. All the cables that are necessary for this, like here, the speaker level jumper cable, or in the case of an active speaker, then a jumper cable as a XLR cable, and of course the power cables are supplied in our accessory kits. And of course for the dealer version we also supply all the cables that are necessary to connect all two speakers of a pair to this switching option, where you can then again decide whether you want to listen to the active or to the passive version, or make direct comparisons at any time. We also have here gold-plated bridges inside, which are to be used for single wiring connection. If a customer would prefer to have bi-wiring or bi-amping by traditional amps, these could go out, of course, and then the tweeter and the mid-range will have their individual inputs. What I want to show now is a naked speaker, so to speak, because partly the speakers come assembled and partly the horns need to be attached still. This has logistic reasons. This also gives me the opportunity to show you how the front cover is held, because it's simply put on here and then held by magnets. So easy to remove, easy to put on again. We have here in the front a ring, which is mainly for design reasons, to give the tweeter a little bit of extra attention, so to speak. And in this ring, we also included the on-off switch. So when this switch, which is backlit, is in orange or red color, this means the speaker is in standby. And if I press this here, the light changes to white, which means it is in operation. So it's easy to see from the front as well. Just to let you know, the tweeter horn has here a thread and simply goes in here and can be tightened by clockwise turning. Really tight as your hands allow. And the same is true for the mid-range horn. So here we have the thread, inside is the counter thread. There we are. One of the biggest changes in the G3 series compared to the previous series is the tweeter. Because what we wanted to achieve is that we have in our speakers a coplanar arrangement. Means the voice coil of the mid-range and the voice coil of the tweeter should be on the same plane. I can show this here a little bit in the Duo GT. The mid-range voice coil is roundabout in the middle of this tube, and the tweeter voice coil, because the horn is now much deeper than before, is also on the same plane. So we can be sure that the wave launch of the mid-range and of the tweeter is exactly on the same plane. So we have perfect group delay or timing, so to speak. And how did we achieve this? This is the previous tweeter. You can see it is just some 8 centimeters roundabout deep and has a diameter on the front of some 18 centimeters, while the new one is already 19 centimeters deep and has a 20 centimeter opening. So we were modifying this internal curvature of the horn so that it would allow us to make the horn much longer. Because when we make the horn much longer, the driver moves further backwards and we can achieve this perfect phase and time alignment. And by making that step, saying, okay, let's invest into a new horn piece, and let's research a new horn shape that would give us the same tonal results, but also gives us the opportunity to make this phase and time alignment. We also opted for a new driver. So here you can see the old one, which was operating on a mylar membrane, which was a dome, and here the driver was more or less uncovered, while here in the new we made a complete cabinet for the driver, so a better insulation of the driver. And in the new driver we are no longer using a dome tweeter, we are using a ring membrane. And this ring-shaped membrane has even much less moving mass than the previous dome tweeter, and has also a so-called annular drive. So this means that the forces on the back, on the rear, and on the front of the membrane are better balanced out. So we can be sure that the dynamic behavior of the membrane is also improved over the old driver. And another also considerable change, maybe not exactly that big, but also considerable, is with the latest bass drivers. We used to work with a supplier that could give us a design from a toolbox. So we could select from a choice of baskets, from a choice of surrounds, from a choice of membranes, from a choice of magnets, and could assemble then prototypes, which we then reviewed and then had probably 1 or 2 more changes, and voila, we had our driver. But this time we took it from scratch. So we asked a new supplier to do something that would be completely based on our wish list. And one of the things was, of course, the basket. So we wanted to have an ultra-rigid material and an ultra-rigid structure. We got the opportunity to use an all-magnet magnet, so we do no longer have regular pole pieces here, but this is all done in a fully magnetic structure. We have here, it's visible even, a huge voice coil inside. It's a 6.5-inch voice coil for the 25 or 10-inch driver and for the 30 centimeter or 12-inch driver. So what you see here on the front as the dust cover also represents the size of the voice coil. And that's truly unique, as a driver of that size typically has a voice coil of 3 inches or so. and this voice coil has 6.5 inches. So by that we have a motor here that can translate forces onto the membrane that is better by a factor compared to most other drivers that you would find on the market in this size. And we have two sizes available. Here in my hand I hold the 12-incher, but the 10-incher is made from the same structure, made with the same materials, just a little bit smaller. This is the Trio in its latest G3 version. The Trio was the first of the G3s that we brought out because it was the most complex to design. And this has mainly the reason that we not only changed something here with the drivers and with the arrangement, but also that we changed something really considerably with the setup of using this speaker, the Trio, as an active speaker also. So we made it modular and made sure that customers that want to operate it by their own amplifiers can use it, but as well wanted to make an offer to bring an active speaker to the market to actually react onto an increasing interest in active speakers lately. We can start with the mechanical setup, because in the new Trio we have an arrangement here in the drivers that respects a coplanar arrangement. So the voice coils of the drivers, I can put my hand here where the voice coil in the mid-range is, voice coil in the tweeter is, voice coil in the low-mid is on the same plane. So we have a time-aligned wave launch towards the listener. One exception, if you turn the speaker, tilt it or tow it towards or away from the listening position, the tweeter changes its position against the listener. And this means that we now have here an adjustment option. So here on the inside I have a screw that I can loosen, and if this is loose, I can move the speaker back and forth. So I have a center position if the speaker is more or less directly pointing at the listener, but this is for whatever reason not possible or not desired. The speaker can still be towed in differently, and the tweeter can then be readjusted, so that again we have a coplanar arrangement versus the listener. So this is one very important change, and the second very important change is on the other side, where we now have this technical column included. In this column we have the opportunity to put in a passive crossover, to put in the iTRON, which means our active module, and we have in the middle a cable duct, a connection duct actually, because the cable duct is in the rear. So in this connection duct, all the sockets and switches are located. If the crossover, the passive crossover is built in, you can find here all your WBT connectors and the connector that guides the signal from the crossover into the drivers, because the cabling that connects crossover and drivers is hidden here in this frontal structure, in this frontal cable guide. And or, depending on the setup you choose, you can have the iTRON built in, and then we'll find all the connectors like the XLR input, again like the output towards the driver, and the connection here to the on-off sensor, which is not working on pressure, but just on touch. So just using my finger, touching it, switches the speaker on or off. So this is all present here in this connection duct. If this is closed, made by an aluminum cover plate, this is completely hidden and visually, how can I say this, no longer disturbing. While here in the rear, we then still have a cable duct where the cables that come from the amplifier, or because the trio is always a 4-piece system with the space horns as the subwoofers. So all this cabling that interconnects the system and the subwoofers with the trio can be hidden in this duct. Here in the rear we have an outlet, a hole, and once this is all covered or all stowed away, then there is still a cover plate that snaps onto this duct by metal clamps and seals this as well. So the speaker is as lean and clean when it comes to cabling as possible. The iTRON version has also the operational features that we can show you here. We can start here on the right with a total gain switching. Why do we need this? We have plus and minus 1.5 dB, 3 dB and 6 dB. And these switches operate in addition to each other. So if I switch all three to the plus position, I have plus 6, plus 3, plus 1.5 means plus 10.5 dB. Or if I do it the other way around, all three to the negative, I will have minus 10.5 dB. This has two reasons. Reason number one, some amplifiers, some preamplifiers, because this receives preamp signal, some preamplifiers have a relatively strong output. So as soon as you start adjusting the volume in the lower volume regions, it can happen that the speaker reacts almost drastically. So a little change of the volume knob already makes a big change in the volume level you hear. And you can avoid this by switching the gain to the minimum position. So then you automatically have to crank up your preamp a bit more, which means that you have more leeway now to adjust the volume in lower regions. And just as an example. And the other thing is that we also have an option to make it switchable, for the trio, to make it switchable between the passive crossover and the iTRON. So that at the same time, a normal amplifier can be connected and the iTRON can be connected. And by the flick of a switch that has a cable that runs until the listening seat, the cable we supply for that is long enough, you can always check and test for yourself how the passive version sounds against the active version. But for that, we need to respect that the external amplifier used for that may not have the same internal gain as the iTRON amplifier. And for this, we of course need a possibility to make the iTRON as loud or as low in volume, depending, as the external amp. Only by adding these gain switches we can make sure that you have a fair comparison afterwards. Otherwise, you would always have to readjust the volume at your preamplifier, and that would not be a very practical solution. We also have here an adjustment option for the low, mid, and high drivers individually. So in 1.5 dB increments, plus and minus, you can adjust the three drivers individually. This may have to do, for example, with the acoustical properties of the room. If a room would be relatively undamped, so very little furniture, maybe no carpeting, nothing, lots of glass or other hard reflecting boundaries, then it might be advantageous if you can reduce the tweeter and maybe also the mid-range level a little bit, so that the sound overall gets a little bit darker maybe, but in this room then I would call it rather warmer. Or the contrary, if you have a room that is stuffed with furniture or has thick carpets and the sound has not the sparkle you would like to hear, then you can still readjust here the mid-range and bass drivers to a position where you can say, now it comes back, now I have more of that. Another option is a dimmer toggle. So this switch here is backlit obviously, and the backlight can be adjusted in 8 steps. So depending on how bright it can be or should be in your room, you can readjust this. And one last thing that has its own button here is the so-called eFuse feature. The eFuse is a replacement for a regular glass fuse. So we have a circuit inside, and this is world exclusive with our products. We have a circuit inside that monitors the power input so effectively that we can say you can simply replace the glass fuse by a copper bolt, which we supply, by the way, it's in the accessory box, because some people have the experience that exchanging the fuse can make a big difference for them. But what better fuse could you use like no fuse? So the flow of power is completely uninterrupted, so to speak. But in this case, you of course have to monitor the power inrush differently, and this we do by this so-called eFuse circuitry. One thing that is also convenient is an option to switch the speaker into several on or on-off modes. This is accessible by the so-called power-on mode. It's a small screw, so we would recommend to use a small screwdriver which has 4 positions, A, B, C, and D. Position A means that as soon as power is provided, so which means press this rocker switch to position 1 and power is provided, the speaker will switch on. This would be a position that would be convenient if you had one central power hub. If it was a power distributor with remote controlled on-off, or if it was a power regenerator that you would prefer to use in addition, that would also give you the option to switch the whole system on and off in one go, then you would adjust the position A here, and you can be sure as soon as the speaker gets power, this LED will turn white, means the trio is on. Position B waits for 12-volt trigger voltage. We also have provided here according 3.5 millimeter phone jacks. So we can receive 12 volts, but we can also send 12 volts from the trio. So this can help in automating a system's on-off operation. So it can be adjusted in a way where you have to switch on only one trio, so not have to go to the left speaker and to the right speaker, but just to the left or to the right speaker. Switch this speaker into operation, and this speaker will send a 12-volt signal to the subwoofers and to the other speaker and turn on the whole system and turn off the whole system. Position C is a position where the speaker, as soon as receiving power, stays in standby mode. So if you want to put the speaker in operation, you still have to touch here this sensor. Yeah. So this will be the factory default. So the speaker will be connected, will receive power, and will go into orange backlight. And position D is previewed for a future option, which might be a system remote control, but this is not yet fit to print. Yep. So now we have switched to the other channel of the trio G3, because on this channel we left the crossover open, the passive crossover open. So as much as we believe in the iTRON technology, that's the reason why we do it, we still say that someone that is preferring passive operation for whatever reason should get the best result possible, and this is why we put a lot of effort in the crossover parts as well and in the crossover design. And I think it is also very interesting to have that glance inside such a trio crossover. You can also see here the relay banks. It's for the three ways, tweeter, mid-range, low mid-range, that switch between the iTRON operation and the passive operation in case the speaker comes with the switching unit installed. In general, the trio is, like all other G3 speakers from now on, a modular system. So the decision for a passive crossover or for an iTRON is not a definitive one. So we have blank covers for what you don't have or don't need. But if you want to redecide on one point, you are always able to do this, because if a passive crossover was installed, here a blank aluminum plate would sit, which can of course be dismantled and then be replaced by a fully operational iTRON. And the other way around, if you started with iTRON and at one point say, I still want to have the passive operation as well. And for those customers that may be considered as amplifier collectors, that have something at home where they say, well, maybe I can hear that the iTRON is giving me the best results, but still there are good reasons for me or good memories from the old days where I would rather have another amplifier connected. And if it really was for nostalgic reasons, not important for us, we could still also offer this switching unit, actually conceived as a dealer model, so that also a customer that is this kind of an amplifier collector, for example, would have that switching option at home as well. And for that I can quickly show. This is all done here by BNC cables. So once this connection is made, come on. This is a relatively, or a perfectly secure and foolproof thing. Let's not forget, a trio is always a minimum 4-piece system. 2 trio satellites and the subwoofers, so a minimum of 2 of these space horns, 1 per channel. What you see here is a 6-fold stack with 1, 2, 3 per side, and we purposely use both sizes of space horns, because we have the space horn twin, which means we have 2 12-inch drivers firing into the horn, and we have the space horn single, which means 1 12-inch driver is firing into the horn. The horn inside is like a snail's house, so it folds inside the cabinet, and we gain a length of round about 2.10 meters by this. So this is really a seriously long horn. And the whole opening section, the whole frontal section, also makes sure that we have a very nice protrusion of the sound waves that come out of the horns into the room. That is why we call this version now a space horn and no longer a bass horn like the version before, because this space horn reacts, you can say, works better on the placement. So it has a much better propagation of the waves into the room, respecting that it stands, in most of the cases, either like here in the middle against the wall or in a corner against the walls. It is possible to do this step by step. So also with the previous version, the bass horn, we had customers that started with one pair and upgraded over the years to a second and to a third pair. And this is of course the same here with the new space horn. So it fully depends on the options, on the possibilities that would be available in the room to say, okay, 2, 4, or 6 are what I need here. Actually, if we just talk sound pressure level, if we just talk dynamic capabilities, 2 of these do a fantastic job, even in a room like ours, which is just over 80 square meters big and 4 meters high. So yeah, it is always bettering the output if you stack them up, no question. The advantages of stacking are obvious, but no worries if you say it's only possible for me to use 2 of them, they will not disappoint. On the side of the space horn, we have the electronics. So 2 things. We have the electronic module with its controls and switches. I can switch that one on. So you can see a DSP jumping into operation. And this DSP is connected by a Ethernet cable, RG45 cable. So we can always manipulate or adjust the subwoofers, for example, by a laptop. If this is connected to a router with Wi-Fi capability, then the laptop would as well connect wirelessly to the space horns. It also features 2 RG45s. This means we can daisy chain them, which makes connection much easier and which also simplifies the routing of those RG45 cables. Here we have the same ABC, ABCD power on mode options. So we can also say we want it to be powered on directly with supplying current. We can power it up by a 12-volt trigger signal, or we can power it up by pressing this standby button. The DSP itself has the volume control also included. So as the first and most important adjustment, there is no necessity to connect a computer at all. This can be done directly here at the DSP's volume up and volume down buttons. Here from the rear side, so I have to ask the camera to me, you can see the connectors and switches for the signal inputs. On the top, we input either the XLR or the speaker level signal, and we have a switch where you make the decision which one you use. Then we have the connector that sends the signal to the 12-inch drivers. We have a little antenna, which does not need to be applied. It only needs to be applied if Avantgarde Acoustic would bring out a new firmware, because inside the amplifier is a controller that, for example, programs the behavior of this power on mode switch. So if there was any option or addition to these functionalities that we could give you in the future, we would send this to you as a file, so-called BIN file, and this would go onto the controller, the internal controller, wirelessly. No need to connect a cable for that. This controller can throw out its own Wi-Fi network, and your phone or your tablet or your computer can connect to that. And this is completely covered by a door that has the same unhinging effect like known from furniture. So by closing this door, we have a lean and clean appearance. And by the way, this cable here, this LAN cable, we leave it applied here because, and also many dealers we may have it still connected, still applied, because then you can always directly connect to a laptop or tablet, whatever, and show to a customer, to an interested customer, what the options are. But in a home, this kind of a programming would be more or less a one-time thing. So after that, these plugs can of course go, so then we would have an even cleaner appearance.